let's get looking at the charts here. We have December's range. You go to the monthly candle here. Okay, so if everyone wants to know how I draw these ranges out, I go to the monthly candle. I have a fib setting. So if you pull up your fib, I have a bunch of different fib settings. So if you click on it, I have all these different settings here. So for the one I use for ranges, I click this, settings, style, and I just mark the 0, the 1, and the 0.5. This is what I put on there to do this. So I go and I take December's candle, the low and the high, and now we've got it here. So this is December's range. And so the reason I mark this, right, is because this is the prior month's range. So we basically took out the previous month's high, and then we fell back in the range. Now, where have we done that in the past, right? So I drew out this range because I said, hey, this is reminding me of June's range. If you guys have been following me for a while, we traded this fucking range like a motherfucker, right? We smoked it. So we traded up to the highs, took out June's high in July, had the breaker, right? Remember that short? Traded all the way to June's low. Then what? We got long. Remember, this is where we got giga long for this run to 50. Was completely based off of June's range here. December's range, I'm treating it the exact same. We've traded outside of the high, and now we're back in. So my eyes immediately are drawn to the lower band of the range. I believe we will take out this range low. The question is, do we get a bounce? So when we had this move up, I was hoping we would bounce up to this breaker here, and I would short. So that was the original plan, was to short this breaker, and the target was down here. Did not get that high. We had a very shallow bounce, but we did get this SFP within the 12-hour fair value gap, right? Which is this candle here. Okay, so this is 1, 2, 3 candles, empty space. Then we had a raid, market structure break, and then it faded. So I shorted here the hourly trigger. I shorted this in Telegram. I shorted this in the Haven. We just took the hourly trigger here. We had the clear fade signal, and it started to puke. I closed early. I thought we might bounce. I was still looking for a bounce, and when we closed this 12-hour, when we closed it like this above the mid-range, I thought, hey, maybe now we've got some highs here that are induced. Maybe we'll get a bounce up, run these highs, and then we'll get the real dump. But unfortunately, it ended up just rolling over. Again, we had a market structure break here. In reality, we had another 12-hour setup right there. And so I just didn't get it. I closed it early. I fumbled the bag, but it sold off again. We came and retested that breaker. I thought maybe we'll run this high, and it's just sold off again. So now it looks like we're getting a bounce, right? This is probably the strongest it's looked in this entire move down. So where will this bounce go? Immediately to me, I'm taking a fib here. I'm saying, okay, the best case scenario would be running both of these highs here, right? Would be running this high and this high and getting like a serious bounce in, and then maybe down again. So up into that original breaker, blow out all of the fucking late bears, put in a lower high, right? And then sell off again. And then maybe we take out December's low. Maybe we take out 35K. I don't really know. So that would be the best case scenario, I think, for the time being. Be the biggest rally. If we get this kind of a rally here on Bitcoin, I highly suspect that some altcoins like Ethereum and Ethereum betas can really do well. That would be the ideal. The next scenario I'm looking at really would be something like this, right? So we have a new H12 range here and some sort of move up into this range. Now the order block is quite far away, but if you take the low to the high here and you put in a regular fib, I could see this pulling up into the right? So I could see this pulling up towards here, right? The upper part of the range, and then maybe this is where it goes lower again. That's another scenario that I could see happening. So the best case scenario, I think, for the market, right? If we want to see alts get a pop, Bitcoin, Ethereum, everything go up higher, right? The stock market is flying. So this is another trade. This is from the Haven, but we longed, the higher low here. So this would be the more bullish scenarios. We'd get a serious rally here on Bitcoin, but that would be the most bullish scenario. I think alts could go crazy. We could definitely see Ethereum really go ham on something like that. But the more conservative scenario and the more bearish scenario is that this is a very shallow pullback here. And we are going to see, a move up into here and then down into the lows again. So those are the two scenarios I'm watching, right? So scenario 1 is just up into here and then lower. Scenario 2 is a serious rally and then lower. But ultimately, I think either scenario ends with us taking out 37K and taking out probably most of this. This just seems juicy to me, and I wouldn't be surprised if this all gets wiped out in some sort of big fucking huge candle, because we still haven't, like, this was a decently big candle, but we could have a 20%er. Just one candle is 20%. That could be what wipes that out there. We also have a very nice monthly level here. This is right about at 35K right there. So that would be in line with taking out December's low, and those built up lows there would be in line with that big monthly support level there. And we also have this monthly fair value gap here that's been kind of inverted. So I do think that this is an area where if we come down here, if you believe that we're going to trade to new all-time highs, if the rest of the market does not shit the bed, if we're going to make a new all-time high, it's not over yet. You know, the rally is not done. You know, we're not going back to fucking 20K or 10K or something crazy like that. This to me down here, you know, really anywhere below 40 down into 35K, I think is probably pretty good value if we're going to put in a higher low for the next leg up. That's kind of my thoughts on Bitcoin for now. High time frame and kind of medium and short term is, you know, let's see how much juice this bounce has. Let's see where it can take us. I've got my couple of scenarios that I'm watching here, really, but any sort of bearish setup. So if we get a high here and then a sweep, right? If we sweep this high, if we sweep this high, or if we trade all the way up into here, I'm really looking for opportunities to short Bitcoin because I do think we eventually will trade down here. So the question is, how high does this bounce go? Are there going to be any long opportunities while this bounce is playing out? And then obviously, hopefully getting on board the short. Now, could the lows be in? Maybe, but I don't think so yet. Definitely also something we want to watch here is on the weekly, right? We want to watch this level right here, right? So this could end up being a weekly bullish SFP. So it's only Tuesday. So the weekly candle doesn't close for another 5-6 days. But if we get a weekly close below here, we will now have a weekly SFP and then a weekly break in market structure. You'll have a weekly breaker here, and any bounces into there are like a giga sell, because the last time we've had this was up here, and let's see how that turned out. Weekly SFP, weekly break in market structure, nuke it. Weekly SFP, weekly break in market structure. This price action here, right? We even got the, you know, the lower high into the breaker as well. You know, this price action here is what I based my thesis on for the Ethereum play. When this was happening on Bitcoin, during this recovery here, that's when Ethereum did a 2x. So maybe my thesis is still right. It's just that the timing's wrong. Maybe we will have, you know, a break here and then a rally, and then Ethereum will go crazy and then the sell-off will happen. I don't know. But the bottom line is I timed it wrong. But every time we've had the weekly SFP and weekly market structure break, it has not been good. We even had one down here, weekly SFP. There's your weekly market structure break. There's your breaker. Where did it sell off? 25%. These sell-offs were massive, obviously. So something to consider and something to definitely pay attention to is, where is this weekly candle going to close relative to this low here? Because if it closes below, my opinion, the odds are much more heavily weighted towards then another significant leg down as opposed to anything else. So we'll look at Ethereum here. I mean, if this isn't a disappointing chart, I don't know what is. I definitely thought this thing had more juice in it, but it's been pretty fucking weak, man. You know, looking at Ethereum on the weekly or the monthly, you know, it looks like shit. Like this monthly candle on Bitcoin definitely looks kind of shitty as well. By the way, my doom scenario. So this is my worst case scenario for Bitcoin. Worst case scenario, we took out that high, and next we take out these lows. That would be the worst case scenario. I'm just throwing that out there, so if it does happen, I can naturally come and collect the clout. But this would be like the giga bad scenario, is we get a bump and then this thing's fucking, we're over, and we're going way lower. But I'm not banking on that. I'm banking on more of a higher low, you know, around 35K, like I said, but you got to be prepared for anything. If you think Bitcoin can go to 100K, you have to be equally as prepared for it to go to 10K. Why do you assume something can go up fucking 5x in price, but not also go down 50% or 60%? It just doesn't make any sense. Okay, so let's look at Ethereum. So Ethereum's been disappointing. You know, we tried a long somewhere in the middle here, and then I waited and I said, okay, well, we have this 12-hour, you know, setup. I played along here, and I think I was right for about 10 seconds. So I played along off of this level here. It bounced for literally a couple hours and then just fully torqued down, and now we've traded all the way to the range low here. We're now trading in a new bearish range, right? So we've broken that market structure to the downside, and the range high is way the fuck up here. So we don't know where this low will form yet on the 12-hour until this candle closes, but it looks like this is probably where it is. So you would hope, similar to Bitcoin saying, hey, this can bounce a little, you would hope this can rally a little bit bit as well. How high? I have no idea. And it appears that it's still very much dependent on what Bitcoin is going to do. So I'm going to, wait and see if this thing has some decent juice. How high or how far can it bounce? I don't really know yet, but it's going to depend largely on Bitcoin. If we want to see Ethereum bounce up to here, this fair value gap up here, 10%, well, guess what? Bitcoin is going to need to have a decent rally, and around 10% on Bitcoin puts us up in that area that I was talking about for the larger lower high. So that's what you'd want to see on Bitcoin if Ethereum's going to, have any juice. But we could literally wake up tomorrow and Barry could be online, and at 6:30 a.m., Grayscale could just start nuking the fucking coins again. The last 2 nights, the sell-off has started in Asia. And it was funny. I saw a bunch of people being like, oh, we're selling off in Asia now because they're front running the GBTC and this thing's going to bounce in their face. And then Barry came online and said, no, fucking slammed it. Same thing yesterday. We started selling off during Asia. People said, oh, they're front running it. Fucking slammed it again. So we'll have to wait and see. But for now, I think you gotta wait for this, at least for how I trade. I need to see this put in some sort of bullish structure higher if we're going to get some sort of sustained rally on altcoins, right? Like I've seen some people being like, well, they're not dumping alts, right? They're only dumping Bitcoin. But if they dump Bitcoin another 10% lower, altcoins are going to get smoked again. Now, if you want to figure out what's going to bounce the hardest, then you need to start looking at those alt BTC pairs. So we are coming into some support here on ETH BTC. So again, if we do get a significant rally on Bitcoin, I do think Ethereum could do well potentially, but it still is dependent on Bitcoin overall. So Solana, I talked about, this is from weeks ago, right? I talked about wanting to see this order block get tagged. So we came into it. Right now, it looks like an SFP on the weekly. Go down to the 12-hour. We've tagged the zone. The breaker here is far away. So I don't really have a long setup here. You could argue this is your long setup here. So if we break above this high, stop goes down here. That would be the long trigger that jumps out at me here on Solana. But again, this is irrelevant unless Bitcoin finds a bottom. So if you look at something like Sol BTC, to me, this still looks not great. I think this can, sell off. Like that looks like, a potential top for a bit. Same with like Sol Ethereum, looks like a potential top for a bit. So until Bitcoin stops going down, catches a significant big for a prolonged period of time, I would be very cautious with any sort of altcoin longs. I'm not saying you can't long altcoins and make money. You absolutely can. I'm just saying, don't expect to hold Solana to a new high if Bitcoin's not at least going sideways at worst. Solana is not going to make a new high here until Bitcoin is going either up or sideways. It's just not going to happen. So when you're looking at these long ideas here, keep that in mind and say, hey, if I think Bitcoin, so let's say Bitcoin does this, it's going to make a lower high here before the next leg down. And this is at 44K, let's say. And so you're long Solana from here and it's trading up. Well, guess what? Yeah, you should be looking here and here for targets, but you should also be looking for when Bitcoin comes into that resistance level. Because if Bitcoin hits 44K and Solana is here, and then Bitcoin's going to make another leg down, but you're still targeting up here, you're probably going to not get your targets, right? So until we have that sustained selling slow down and Bitcoin at least look like it's bottomed, maybe it has bottomed, but at least it's not just aggressively going down anymore, you're just going to want to be very conservative with your profit taking on any sort of longs. Like until Bitcoin stops going down so aggressively, any longs you take are counter trend. So you need to be conservative. So this is an area of interest for me for Solana for sure. And if Bitcoin can have a rally for a few days, like I had mentioned, I do think that this could, have a nice bump higher. But if Bitcoin's going to continue to sell off, this thing can trade deeper into this zone, right? So this is a weekly order block. This level is 20%. So you can be like, hey, I'm a buyer of Solana here. Well, guess what? Solana can trade 15% lower and still maintain this structure, right? And are you going to hold that 15% drawdown? But if Bitcoin's going to go down another 10, 15%, 35K, Solana's probably going to trade below 70, right? So maybe buying here is a little bit preemptive. Maybe you want to sprinkle some in here, and then a little bit lower, and then a little bit lower, right? If that's your plan. What can I say? I can say I told you so, kind of. Capo lives in your head rent free. Buddy, you're watching my video. I must live in your head rent free. I live in your mother's bedroom rent free. And then he just gave me a compliment, the same guy. I'm sorry, Jack. I take it back about what I just said just now. What I just said, that very moment, I take that back about your mother. Cocaine fixes everything. I don't even know what that means. Bro, why even take a COVID test? To see whether or not I have COVID would be the reason. The lower ETH goes, the skinnier your neck becomes. That sounds accurate. So they tell me. This going up just means Ethereum is stronger than Bitcoin relativistically. Relatively? What the fuck? I don't even want to say the word again because I don't know if I fucking just made up a word. The cough syrup's getting to my head. Relativistically. That's a fucking word, right? That's absolutely a fucking word. Relatively. Anyways, Canada is doom main. Well, where do you live, bro? Where should I go? I'm coming to your house. Are you? Are you not? Are you gonna scale in? I don't really know. I feel like the adult smart thing to do is to not go, but the degenerate thing to do would be to, of course, fucking go and fucking get hammered for 4 days. Hope I didn't offend the guy who's from Mexico. I ruined their surprise. Fuck them. They won't give me a deal. Fuck them on the gang. It doesn't make any sense. What do you use to track your bags? I'm fucking old school, bro. I fucking use a spreadsheet. Jesus Christ, bro. How do you have 7 figs in your first bull run? Give me $1. Fuck, give me $10. Bruh. What the fuck? Can someone give this guy the Discord fucking link so he can fucking shut up?